Hey everybody, I'm Grandmaster Ben Finegold, back with our weekly lecture series. Uh, the next 4 lectures, including this one, are going to be on different openings, and they're sponsored by the same sponsor. Unfortunately, due to suspicious circumstances, we weren't able to get the sponsor's message so I can tell you the sponsor name and what their opinion is of stuff. However, the sponsor will be mentioned in the description and in the editing of the video, just not me announcing it, but you'll still see it. Also, the next 3 videos on openings, which I assume are the next 3 weeks, but I'm not sure what the order is, will be by the same sponsor. They're sponsoring 4 lectures, one for each of you. So thanks to the sponsor, who's not anonymous, but at the moment they're anonymous. Anyway, the first lecture is on the Dutch defense, which you can see a picture of on Wikipedia on the screen. And the sponsor was specific that white played d4, which isn't necessarily the case in some Dutches, although I think to be very accurate, d4 should be move 1 to call it a Dutch defense. Now, if you're talking about Ginger GM, Simon Williams, who's current Grandmaster playing the Dutch defense for black every time, he plays the Dutch. I mean, he plays f5 on move 1, irrespective of whether you play d4, c4, or knight f3 on move 1. And if white doesn't play d4 at any point in the opening, some would argue it's not a Dutch, although I think Ginger GM would call it a Dutch because he's playing f5, he's playing the Dutch. You know, what you do is secondary. But the sponsor, who has rights, because the sponsor gave the money, he wanted the Dutch where white plays d4 on move 1, which is what Wikipedia says, so that's good. Okay. And then this is a pretty good Wikipedia article. They tell you which grandmasters played the Dutch. They tell you the history of the opening. And more importantly, they show you the different variations. The Leningrad variation, the Stonewall, and the Staunton Gambit. Staunton Gambit is not very common unless you're under 2,000. Then it's pretty common. And then they talk about other stuff, ECO codes, which I don't think are very important anymore. In the 70s, 80s, and 90s, ECO codes were pretty popular and important for the computer age. Okay. So the Wikipedia article is pretty thorough, talking about the Dutch defense. I want to get to the board right away because I want to talk about stuff. Okay. So I have 3 games I want to look at. Now, again, the sponsor wasn't specific, so I made an assumption which could anger the sponsor if my assumption's wrong. But if my assumptions are wrong and you're going to sponsor a lecture, make it very specific what you want. Otherwise, I may guess what you want, and then you're going to be mad. I assume, since the sponsor said, I want you to look at the Dutch, that they wanted to look at it from the black side. It could be they want to beat the Dutch and show me how white beats the Dutch, but I doubt it. But it's possible. If they wanted that, they're not going to like this lecture. This lecture is from black's point of view. Black wins all the games, and we're going to discuss, what black's doing. Now, after d4, there's 2 kinds of Dutch players. Okay, one kind plays f5. That's the Dutch. The second kind of Dutch player, which is equally likely, plays the move e6. And the reason they play e6 is they're avoiding certain variations of the Dutch that they want to avoid. And they play f5 on move 2, which is transposed to the Dutch. And I would say in the Dutch world, it's about 50-50. If people play the Dutch, half of them will play f5 here, and half of them will play e6, and then try to play f5, and avoid a couple of lines that I'm going to explain to you. Now, if you play e6 on move 1, because you want to avoid certain things, you have to be prepared to play the French defense. And when I was growing up, it was very common that people who played the Dutch also played the French defense. Obviously, if you play e6 to play the Dutch after, say, c4, f5, for example, white could play e4, and this is the French defense. Now, my friend Wes Berger, he was my friend before you were born, and he was my dad's friend before I was born. God damn. Wes Berger met my dad in college in the early 50s, and I was born in 1969. And Wes Berger is still alive. He's 85. Chess isn't very good, but he played the Dutch when he was playing in the 50s, 60s, 70s. And in the French defense, if you played knight d2, Wes Berger played a move that nobody plays, f5. So he played the French and the Dutch. God damn. And people would tell Wes Berger, f5, that's a bad move. And Wes would respond with, I'll stop playing it when somebody beats me. Truth hurts. And the famous game, if you're into Michigan chess history, which you're not, Wes Berger beat Vlastimil Hort when Vlastimil Hort was like number 10 in the world. You can look up Vlastimil Hort on Wikipedia, H-O-R-T. I think he's still alive too, I think. He's in his 80s also, I believe. But when they played in 1973 or so, then they were in their prime. And Wes beat Vlastimil Hort. God damn. I never beat Vlastimil Hort. Vlastimil Hort's a pretty funny guy. It's possible, although I don't remember because I'm old and I can't remember. I did a lecture on great players of the past, Vlastimil Hort. I don't remember doing that. So if you want to sponsor that lecture, contact Karen. Okay. Now, let's get into the details of why some people don't play f5. One reason, which is not the main reason, is white can play bishop g5. If black plays e6 early, that's unlikely because the bishop's hanging. In fact, I've played bishop g5 on more than one occasion. Now, in my opinion, this is my opinion, you don't have to share my opinion. If you're under 1500, I wouldn't play the Dutch because it's strategically very complicated and you open up your king. And if you don't know certain variations, you could lose in less than 10 moves. One variation is h6, g5, and it looks like black's winning a piece. And in this position, white actually has 3 good moves, confusing the audience. One of them is e4, threatening queen h5 mate with advantage. Another is e3, with the same idea, queen h5 mate. Also, you can just play bishop g3, and after f4, e3 threatens the f pawn and threatens mate. And one of the main lines in this variation, which is very confusing even to a strong grandmaster, stronger than me, is now black plays h5, stopping queen h5 mate, and then h4. And then I think white plays bishop d3, threatening bishop g6 mate. Eventually, black is going to win a piece, white gets some pawns and black's king is very exposed. I believe theory says white's better here. But if the engine you have says black is better, I'm sure I'm going to hear about it in the YouTube comments. Okay, I don't really know this slide. I just know it's insane. Okay. Now, what's funny is I play bishop f4, which is very unusual when I'm white, and my plan is after g5 to play bishop e5. This is actually good for white. And even though I've lost to tempo, because I've played bishop g5, bishop f4, I argue h6 hurts black because it weakens his king. He'd rather have the pawn on h7 and just play g6, bishop g7, and fianchetto the bishop. Okay, and I've had this position several times in my career, and I was going to show my game with Tukmakov from Reykjavik 1990. You can look that up on the internet. Finegold, Tukmakov, Reykjavik 1990, before you were born. And this is what I did. Pawn sacrifice that I invented. If knight takes e4, queen h5 leads to mate. And I won that game. That was one of my nicer games. What I remember about that game was we analyzed afterwards. Analyzing with us were comrades of Tukmakov, grandmasters from Ukraine and Russia. And they were trying to suggest improvements for me, even though I won relatively easily. And Tukmakov got mad at them. It's like, don't suggest improvements for him, suggest improvements for me. I lost. I remember him getting mad at them. He beat me a few years later, so he got his revenge. He beat me in Canada. So I played him in Iceland and Canada. Tukmakov is a famous coach. Over the last 20 years, he's coached some of the best players in the world. But he was a strong player in the 70s, so I played him in 1990 when he wasn't as strong. 70s, he was pretty strong, probably top 20 in the world. Okay, the Dutch is complicated because black is seizing squares in white's territory, and while at the same time opening up his king a little bit. And it's a very fighting opening. That's why Ginger GM plays it. One game we're not going to look at, because we already looked at it in another lecture, is the game Gelfand Ginger GM, the Simon Williams. Gelfand is better than Simon Williams. Gelfand is better than me, but me and Simon Williams both beat Gelfand. And he did it with a Dutch. So you can look that up on the internet also, Gelfand Simon Williams. Or if you want to see me talk about the game, you can find it in old lectures. There's a lecture on great players of the past, Simon Williams, which Ginger GM took as a slight. Like, did he pass away? Great players of the past. I just meant that his best days were behind him. He's older like me. He's not as old as me, but he's not in his prime. So, certain players who don't play very often or are elderly, they were great players 20, 30 years ago. They're not great now. Okay, Lako's a good example. If I did a Lako lecture, that would be great players of the past. Because Lako's not top 10, top 20, top 30 anymore. And Lako hardly plays chess. So he's not great players of the present, even though he's alive. He was great players of the present 20 years ago when he was playing Kramnik for the World Championship. Okay, so first game we're going to look at is an important game. It was played in 1946 in Groningen, which is in the Netherlands. I've played many tournaments in Groningen. And this is against Herman Steiner, American, not sure if he's a grandmaster because it was 1946. And the reason this is important is Botvinnik is the only world champion who played the Dutch a lot. So I should show a Dutch game that Botvinnik won. And boy, did he win. God damn. Okay, it's the beating of a lifetime. After you watch this lecture, you're probably going to start playing the Dutch because black does so well. I'm not showing games white won, I'm showing games black won. Botvinnik knew what he was doing even in 1946. Botvinnik played e6 because Botvinnik, as you all know, except for one thing, Botvinnik played the French defense. So actually, I was talking about something and I forgot to finish it. After f5, I was talking about bishop g5. There's something called the Staunton Gambit e4, which grandmasters do not fear, but lower rated players do. And you get this very sharp, complicated position. White usually plays f3 and sacrifices a pawn and gets a lead in development. Black has a open king. So to avoid all of these gambits and weird sidelines, a lot of grandmasters play e6, especially if they play the French defense. On the other hand, if you play the Leningrad Dutch is g6, bishop g7 very early, then you don't play e6. You play f5, knight f6, g6, bishop g7. It's a King's Indian, except you played f5 on move 1. The King's Indian, usually you play f5 about move 12. But here we're playing it on move 1. So in some ways, it's an improved King's Indian. Isn't saying much. Okay, Botvinnik played e6. He doesn't play the Leningrad. And white didn't play a French defense. If white played e4, then I wouldn't show you this game because this isn't a French defense lecture. And now black played f5. We don't have to worry about e4. e4 as a pawn sacrifice doesn't make sense right now. Bishop g5 makes less sense because it's just hanging. So we avoided all of that. Okay, now to the Dutch. Okay, g3. That's the most common move at the grandmaster level, fianchettoing your bishop. And Botvinnik played bishop b4 check, which is unusual. Typically, people who play the Stonewall here play d5 c6. Now, for reasons I don't know, it could be popularity, it could be there's refutation, I don't know. The old Dutch from the 40s, 50s, and 60s, black played bishop e7, castles, and d6. Nobody plays that anymore. But if you look at Dutch games from 70, 60, 50 years ago, then black played that way. Typically, black plays a Stonewall, which Botvinnik did do, but he waited. He checked first, bishop d2, and then he put his bishop back on e7. He thought the bishop's worse on d2 than c1, blocks the queen, blocks the knight. It doesn't matter very much. It's a small difference. Okay, now we play normal chess. Black plays the Stonewall. That's the Stonewall. Occasionally, you'll find somebody who plays the Stonewall with white. They play f4, and they put their pawns in this same formation, except they're white. That's called the reverse Stonewall. Even though white's doing it, it's like the King's Indian attack. White's doing it instead of usually black. In the Stonewall, currently, the bishop is usually on d6. But a long time ago, bishop on e7 was considered fine. So basically, black plays for checkmate because black has access to g4 and e4. And as compensation for white for getting checkmated, the bishop on c8 is terrible. And it's always terrible. And there's two things black can do about it. Bishop d7, bishop e8, bishop h5, which takes a long time. Or b6, bishop b7, occasionally bishop a6. And occasionally, black does nothing about it, and black's bishop just sucks. That also happens. But if you're checkmating your opponent, it's okay to have a bad bishop. Okay, castles. Bishop f4. So if black had not played check and played bishop e7 right away, and white played bishop f4, that's the same tempi. We're one move closer to time control. Okay, queen e8. Typical in the Dutch, the queen goes to g6 or h5, and black plays for checkmate. Queen c2, queen h5, rook ae1. That's a very strange move. I've almost never seen white play rook ae1 in a Dutch. Typically, white's advancing on the queen side because white has more space on the queen side and maybe puts the rook on b1 for the open b line later. So rook ae1 is a strange move. Botvinnik developed his knight, knight d7, knight d2, and white's plan, based on his last two moves, is to play f3, e4. Typically in the Dutch, you'd like to play e4 with white, but it's very difficult. But if you can do it, then you take control of the e4 square, and white has more space in the center. Okay, g5, typical Dutch move. When the knight's on f3, we can't play g5 because there's too many pieces on g5. So Botvinnik's like, oh, you're going to let me play g5. All right, I'm going to checkmate you. Bishop c7, very strange move. But bishop e3 doesn't make any sense because after knight g4, we're threatening to mess up white's pawn structure and get the two bishops, and we're threatening mate. So bishop c7, I guess, makes sense, but it's a very strange move for white in the Dutch. Okay, knight e8, attacking the bishop. Bishop e5. Black gets the two bishops, doubles white's pawns. And then f4, Botvinnik wants to either play rook f5 later or maneuver the knight to f5. Black starts the attack against white's king. gf, I don't like that move. Opening up the g file. Knight f3, king h8. Black's going to play rook g8, play on the g file. King h1, knight g7. Knight's going to go to f5. Queen c1. Steiner puts pressure on the pawn on f4, so if knight f5, I could take it. Bishop d7. Now the rook can get out. a3. White wants to play b4. That's very slow. Black's getting a checkmating attack going, and white's playing a3, b4. It's like one guy was the world champion, and the other guy you never heard of. Okay, rook f7. Now the other rook can go to g8. b4, rook g8, rook g1, knight f5. Now, Google Pixel 6 under the wing. Wow. All right. Now, earlier I indicated that white was going to take this pawn if black played knight f5. Now that would fail to knight g3 check, and white's going to lose his queen. So Steiner didn't do that. Steiner played knight d1, very passive move. Black doubled up on the bubble up. All of black's pieces are excellent. Queen takes f4. Now knight g3, not a threat. Rook g4. Botvinnik sacrifices a pawn to continue his mating attack. And then knight h4. Now we're threatening the bishop 6 ways from Sunday. Knight e3 defends the bishop. Knight takes f3, attacks the queen. Now we have a beautiful variation which only John Fontaine will like. Although everybody else will like it too. I just noticed that John Fontaine was here. So if bishop takes f3, black to play and win. Can John Fontaine find the winning move? Impressing himself.
Queen takes h2.
Put it in H.
Check. And then
and then mate.
H4,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so Steiner didn't do that because, mate. And the queen's hanging, so we have to play EF. Rook H4, confusing the audience. Now, black's threatening Rook H2 mate, so white has to play knight F1. Botvinnik gets the last piece into the attack. Bishop to G5. And now, irrespective of what white does, black's going to play bishop F4 with unstoppable mate. So Steiner resigned because bishop F4 is the next move, and then I mate you, and your queen's hanging, and pawn structure's terrible. White's king is all trapped, etc. So that's the difference between a world champion caliber player and a guy you never heard of, Hermann Steiner. Unless you're a chess aficionado, like I've heard of Hermann Steiner, but I don't know much about him except lost to Botvinnik. Okay, so that's a good game for black and the Dutch. I'm sure Simon Williams knows this game because he's a Dutch aficionado, and Botvinnik was the world champion who played the Dutch. Okay, next game is from a more current player, Grandmaster, also plays the Dutch. Several times I've mentioned Simon Williams. Another Grandmaster who plays the Dutch a lot in the 80s and 90s especially was Vladimir Malaniuk. I think Malaniuk is older than me, so I don't know if he plays chess anymore. But I've seen him at tournaments, and he was playing the Dutch, which a lot of Grandmasters don't play with black, but he did. And this is his game from 1987 in Estonia, in Tallinn, against Paul van der Sterren, the Dutch Grandmaster. Okay, and Malaniuk typically plays the Leningrad Dutch with G6, so he doesn't play E6 on move 1, because then you can't do that. Okay, and van der Sterren always plays the main line, so this is the main line. Van der Sterren super booked up. Okay, and in this position, black has several moves. Knight C6 is a move. C6 is a move. Queen E8 is a move. I think A5 is a move. He played Queen E8. Obviously, black wants to play E5. So that's the idea of Queen E8. We saw last game, Botvinnik played Queen E8, Queen H5, and checkmated his opponent. Okay, D5 is the main line. Now if black plays E5, white takes en passant, and black doesn't have that strong pawn center. Knight A6, the knight wants to go to C5. Knight D4, bishop D7, E4. E4 is an interesting move. I don't know if it's good, but it's interesting. So they trade everything. Always trade everything. Then C5. Kicking the knight off of D4. This pawn's very annoying. It's controlling squares in black's territory. So white doesn't want to take en passant and let black control those squares. So white played knight E6, which more or less forces the trade. White has the two bishops, and white's threatening the B7 pawn. Although, the next 5-10 moves, maybe white's going to lose the E pawn, and the bishop on G7 is a monster. But first things first, Malaniuk has to defend B7, rook B8, put it in H, B5, getting counterplay on the queen side, H5, attacking Malaniuk's king. Malaniuk takes, king G2, white's going to play rook H1 and try to take these H pawns. Bishop D4, Malaniuk says, you're not going to play rook H1 because your F pawn would be hanging. So F4, King h8, put it in h. Rook h1, as I indicated earlier. Rook g8. So now, if Van der Steren takes on h5 with the rook, Malaniuk would play rook g7, defending h7. If he wants to defend it again, he could play queen g8. And black has tremendous play on the queen side. White's pieces aren't developed. Okay, now, if Van der Steren had won this game, this would be brilliant. Van der Steren didn't go down without a fight. He played crazy bishop sacrifice. Bishop takes h7. It's tough to sacrifice when all your pieces are on their starting squares. But he did anyway. Then rook takes h5 check. Black's king goes for a walk. Queen f3. And white doesn't really have enough firepower to win the game. Black's bishop is defending, the queen's defending, the rook is. Pieces are over here. So he sacrificed a piece for complications, but didn't work out in his favor. King f8, unleashing his rook. Rook h7, threatening rook f7 check. Queen c8, threatening the e-pawn, giving an escape square for the king. And black also wants to play queen b7, which would trade queens. Then black's a piece up. White does have a mating attack if black trades queens. Queen h5, threatening queen f7 mate. Queen takes e6. f5. Now the tables are turned. Queen e4 check. Black starts to attack, but black better start attacking because white's threatening queen f7 mate. King h2, and once again, Malaniuk plays a move recommended by John Fontaine. Unfortunately for John, this one's much harder to find than the last one. Last one was a queen sacrifice with mate in 2. This is also a sacrifice, and it shows both kings are exposed, but it's black's turn. So black gets to attack first. Bishop g1 check. If king h3, which is the best move, the least black could do is queen h1 mate with advantage. I guess not the best move. So he took the bishop, and now a surprising move. The obvious move is rook takes g3 check. If I was a betting man, I would say rook takes g3 check wins. I don't know if it wins, but I would say it wins. But Malaniuk played more precisely. He played queen e1 check. That definitely wins. Now, white has 2 legal moves and chose to resign. If king h2, then queen g2 and queen g1 are both mate. And if king g2, now we take with the rook. And queen g1 is mate. Or you could mate in 2 with queen f2 check if you don't like mate in 1. So both sides were attacking that game, but Malaniuk's attack came first when he played bishop g1 check. A move that white probably overlooked. And I didn't use an engine, but I would guess white's piece sacrifice earlier in the game, starting with bishop takes h7, was just unsound. Okay, last but not least, we have the most modern game of the lecture, Shirov Ivanchuk, from the Olympiad in 1992 in Manila. And in an Olympiad, you're playing for your team, so you got to play good. You can't play a bad game in an Olympiad. Your teammates don't like that. Now, Shirov has played for Latvia and Spain. I don't know in 92 which country he was playing for. I would guess Spain, but I'm not sure. And Ivanchuk obviously playing for Ukraine. Okay, and Ivanchuk plays every opening. So he doesn't play the Dutch, but the Dutch is an opening, so he plays it because he plays every opening. Okay, and he played E6 because Ivanchuk also plays the French occasionally, and they transpose to the Dutch. And he played C6 to play D5 and get a stonewall, which we saw previously. And unlike Botvinnik, Ivanchuk played bishop D6, which is more common than bishop E7. Okay, now white wants to trade off dark squared bishops, obvious reasons. The bishop on C8 is not very good. The bishop on D6 is good. So sometimes white plays bishop F4 to trade the bishops and accepts the doubled pawns. Shirov plays B3 specifically to play bishop A3 and trade off the dark squared bishops. Ivanchuk avoids this by playing queen E7. Now you can't play bishop A3 because it's not defended sufficiently. Okay, then white played knight E5. Some grandmasters play A4 because they want to play bishop A3. But Shirov played knight E5. The knight's good on E5. Castles. Knight D2. White's given up on bishop A3 ideas. Knight BD7. Knight F3. And knight E4. So white has E5. Black has E4. Everybody's happy. Knight D3. White's decided to play bishop F4 to trade the bishops, and the knight on D3 defends F4. B6, Ivanchuk gets his bishop out. The other knight goes to E5. Now white can play F3 and kick out the knight. Bishop B7. Knight takes D7. That seems like a strange move to me. That knight on D7 wasn't very good. Queen takes F3. Knight goes back to F6. C5. I don't like the move C5. That gives away a center pawn for a side pawn. Now, white's going to have to lose the D pawn and let black play E5. So I think C5 is a strategical mistake. Ivanchuk takes. Shirov gets the two bishops. And black gets the big center. That's a nice center. And the bishop on G2 is blocked by the pawn on F3. I think bad decision by Shirov. E4, what white wants to play. Bishop A6. The bishop on B7 does nothing. Bishop is better on A6. Now black gets a passed pawn. And by attacking the rook on F1 and making it go to E1, now black has control of the F file, which may not matter now, but in 4 or 5 moves, it matters a lot. Queen D2. Don't really understand that move. Knight G4. Here comes rook F2 and knight E3, etc. Bishop H3. Pinning the knight. H5, put it in H. Bishop A3. Bishop's terrible on A3. Terrible anyway. Queen F7, unpinning the knight. And now white blundered and played bishop B4. I think white has to take the knight. The knight's too strong. It's going to F2. It's going to E3. I think Shirov has to take that knight. But he played bishop B4. Why he played bishop B4, I don't know. He's got some explaining to do to his teammates. Rook E8, finally getting his last piece into the position. Bishop A5. Don't really understand that move either. Rook E6. He's going to triple up on the bubble up. Always play bishop f1. And now I can't even ask John Fontaine what black could do because it's too hard. It's unfair. It's too hard for Shirov. It's too hard for me. But I know the answer, making it easier. Always play bishop f1. And in this position, 9 GMs out of 10 would either take the bishop or move the bishop away. But Ivanchuk played for checkmate with the open F file. He played knight f2. And in this position, Shirov made his last blunder. He's got to play bishop g2. And black's winning because all of black's pieces are crushing white. And Shirov made a terrible blunder here. Terrible. One of Shirov's worst moves of his career. Played bishop takes a6. Terrible. Okay, we have while John is thinking about the winning move for black, we have a name for the sponsor. The sponsor is Matt. Go Matt. No sponsor message. So if you know somebody named Matt, it could be them. Unlikely. Okay, John, black to play and win.
Knight h3.
Knight h3 stinks because it's nh3. It's not a bad move, it just stinks, that's nh3. A chemistry joke for you guys. Probably knight h3 is what Shirov analyzed, missing an obvious win for black. It's too obvious. That's why you can't see it.
Queen f3.
Queen f3, threatening queen h1 mate with advantage. The only defense to queen h1 mate is to resign. The other defense is queen takes knight, which is worse than resigning. Also, if you don't like queen h1, you don't like putting your queen in the corner, now black is threatening knight h3 mate. So queen takes knight is the only move. And then black is up a queen. That's not good. So after queen f3, Shirov resigned. And then Shirov had to face his teammates, losing with white in less than 30 moves in the Olympiad. Terrible. And this is in 92, and Shirov was good, but Ivanchuk was good too. Both players, great players of the past, and they both still play chess. Ivanchuk, great player of the present, because Ivanchuk's still good. Shirov's not bad either now, but Ivanchuk. Yeah. Okay, so I want to thank Matt for sponsoring the lecture and the next few lectures. If you'd like to sponsor a lecture, contact my wife Karen. Her details are in the description of the video, and you can sponsor a lecture on the topic of your choice. Today's lecture, the Dutch defense from black's point of view. Black won all the games. I'm sure this will be Simon Williams' favorite lecture I've given, even better than the one I gave on him. Please like and subscribe and leave a comment. Karen and I are back from Vegas, so the uploads will be coming every week now for the weekly lectures, as well as other lectures we do. I'm going to Paris, France next month for the Esports World Cup, so I'll have a week off, but that's in August. So until then, you guys will have some videos to watch. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'm Grandmaster Ben Finegold. Bye.